Now more than ever, you need technology you can rely on.
頼れる人ですよね。
I'm a Dell Technologies advisor.
Ich auch.
我也是。
我aussi.
And if you're a small business, we're with you.
We are with you.
Estamos com você.
We want to help.
So we'll be right here.
At home, answering your calls, providing support,
And standing by you every step of the way.
Bye-bye.
Hello, everyone. So hi, my name is Jordan Woods, and you are in the room C, which is the FinTech room. And we are going to be listening to Danelle Dixon, who is the CEO and Executive Director of the Stellar Development Foundation. Danelle is going to be speaking about driving greater financial inclusion with blockchain. So let me tell you a little bit about Danelle before we get started. Like I mentioned, she's the CEO and Executive Director of the Stellar Development Foundation, also known as SDF. SDF is a nonprofit organization building, sustaining, and growing the Internet for payments using blockchain technology with a focus on global financial inclusion. Prior to SDF, Danelle was COO and Corporate Secretary at Mozilla Corporation. You might know Mozilla because it's the team behind the Firefox browser. At Mozilla, she spearheaded Mozilla's legal, policy, business, revenue, and operations in defense of an open, transparent, and commercially sustainable web. Danelle is a vocal advocate for net neutrality, encryption, and greater user choice and control online. Danelle holds a Doctor of Law and a BA in Political Science. So I'd like to turn it over to Danelle, and we're going to have a little presentation. So do you want to say a few words, Danelle, before we get started, or should we just jump into the presentation?
We can jump into the presentation, but I'll just start by saying, hi, everyone. Thank you, Jordan. That was very kind of an introduction. I'm really excited to be here today at Road to TiEcon with this audience of inspiring business leaders and entrepreneurs. And I'm excited to have the chance to share more about blockchain technology. So let's get it going.
Thanks so much, Danelle, and thanks for being here.
Of course.
So let me go ahead and share my screen. And then we will get going. So ready when you are.
Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about what we're doing at the Stellar Development Foundation to pave this road to greater financial inclusion. But to really understand how this technology can shape the future, I want to start by looking at the evolutions of the past. So next slide. The world has known many forms of money and ways to exchange value. The first known form of currency emerged, I think, 5,000 years ago. I definitely collected pennies and other coins in a jar when I was a kid, but I also collected little specks of gold that I fished out of a stream in California. It all had value. The evolution of money in my lifetime alone has been remarkable. From writing checks to pay your debts, to using debit and credit cards, to today, where my phone in my pocket is also my wallet. Throughout history, our world has redefined itself, and its views and exchanges money and value as better, more efficient ways have emerged. And now it's time to do it again. So next slide. Today's system doesn't work for everyone. Despite advancements in technology, the financial system hasn't kept pace. Today's payments landscape is fragmented and based on models unchanged for decades. Of the hundreds of different monetary systems, each has its own unique set of services. So think ACH and SEPA, it's just examples, and connections to the parallel systems outside its borders. So assets exist in siloed databases, and to interoperate between systems, it takes time and money. All of these disparate banks, money transfer operators, and treasuries combine to make up the entire global financial system as we know it today. At its best, today's system is slow, cumbersome, and fraught with fees. But at its worst, it leaves millions of people marginalized. We can do so much better. Next slide. Blockchain technology is challenging us to think about money and value in a new way. But like the evolutions of the past, presenting opportunities to make it better, more effective, and efficient. In much the same way that the internet democratized access to information, blockchain can do the same for the financial system. It can make sending value around the world as easy as sending an email. And now might be just a really good time to point out that while I believe that a lot of users use the web, but don't really understand the inner workings of the internet, and that's okay. And I think blockchain will be much the same way, where users will take advantage of it because of the positive change it makes in our lives, but may not understand all the details behind it. So with the Stellar Network, we believe we can make this next solution about setting a new global payment standard, one that is completely open and interoperable. And to understand how Stellar can set that standard and make sending money as easy as sending an email, I want to first start by explaining what Stellar is. Because while the average consumer might not need to know how this technology works, I would love for all of you to be able to leverage this in your work. So what is Stellar? Next slide. Stellar is a decentralized open network that connects the world's financial infrastructure. So it is a public global blockchain that is built for interoperability and to further financial access and inclusion. It does that by helping to make money more fluid, thanks to the speed and scale of the Stellar blockchain to transfer value. It helps make markets more open because when financial infrastructure is connected, you have greater geographic impact and affordable access to markets. And ultimately, this empowers people because blockchain means real ownership of the value in your possession. So let me explain how that works. Next slide. Stellar connects financial systems so they can work together on a single platform, so that systems and forms of value can be interoperable with each other, no matter where you are in the world. And Stellar enables the creation and trade of digital representations of all forms of value. So think stocks and bonds, commodities, currencies like dollars, pesos, Bitcoin, gold, silver, real estate, fractionalized real estate, pretty much anything. But tokens are particularly useful when they're tied to currencies. Representing dollars or yuan or euros or digitally makes payments borderless and instant. So that's what everyone today is calling a stablecoin. Even though the stablecoin buzz is pretty new, Stellar was designed for stablecoins before that word even existed. So then Stellar uses an accounting ledger synchronized across a network of independent computers. And this is called the blockchain or distributed ledger technology. The ledger is public, it's permanent, and it's transparent. So ownership of assets and value can be followed clearly throughout the history of the network. Decentralization is stable, secure, and transparent. It's stable because the network persists and synchronizes regularly because it's spread over a series of computers all over the world. So it doesn't rely on a central server, so a truly decentralized network can't be turned off. It's secure because no one changes the numbers or manipulates the data to their liking. And it's transparent because everyone can see the ledger and trust the information is correct. So let me give an example. Next slide. So it starts with the ledger. Next slide. Senders, wherever they are in the world, submit operations to send, to buy, to exchange value across the network. Next slide. The funds travel seamlessly within the network thanks to lumens, which on Stellar, it's the native currency, that facilitate multi-currency transactions. Next slide. And then these transactions are confirmed and final on the next ledger. And all of this happens in 3 to 5 seconds. Not days, not weeks, but 3 to 5 seconds. It's permanent and final. On Stellar, issuers are protected from having multiple claims on an asset because they set both the means for a transaction to execute and what the asset means. In other words, this is how Stellar solves both double spend and any inadvertent or malicious forks. This demonstrates that Stellar is built for interoperability. Digital assets that work together to create a connected global financial infrastructure. And that's part of what makes Stellar a powerful technology. It's important to explain here what's happening at the network level and then what is happening at the application level. So I'm going to do that. Next slide. This is what the tech stack looks like. The foundation is the network layer that runs the protocol. So Stellar's consensus mechanism is called the Stellar Consensus Protocol, We call it SCP. Its main features are it's open, so it allows for open membership. You don't have to ask us to join, you just can support the growing decentralization. It's fast, so it has low latency for fast transaction times. It's secure, it features asymptotic security to make the network invulnerable to 51% attacks, which is important. And it's safe. It prefers safety over liveness to prevent forks. And then we've also built Stellar Horizon, which provides the client-facing API server for the Stellar ecosystem, making this technology accessible for developers around the world. And those developers and businesses are the ones that are creating the application layers. So why do developers and businesses choose to build on Stellar? Next slide. We have some amazing companies building on Stellar today. And to do that, and they do that for some key functionality reasons that this tech stack I just talked about provides them. So I want to dig in on these features a little more closely before giving an example of a business built on Stellar today. Next slide. So first, transactions are fast. They are confirmed in 3 to 5 seconds. And really importantly, the cost of the transactions from the network standpoint, 1 cent can pay for tens of thousands of transactions. So that's pretty remarkable. Next slide. And then asset issuance. I talked earlier about these stable coins. Asset issuance is the backbone of the Stellar network. It's how Stellar connects the world's currencies, and it's what Stellar was built for. With just 2 lines of code, Stellar makes it easy to issue a stablecoin, any currency or asset that can be digitally represented. It is a universal payment network. So typically, a regulated entity, like a financial institution, issues an asset on Stellar that represents something outside the network, something in the real world. So that, again, you got to think stocks, bonds, commodities, Bitcoin, pretty much anything. On Stellar right now, you can even buy gold and silver or fractionalized real estate. A user obtains the Stellar network asset by depositing traditional currency using traditional rails. They can then hold that asset in a Stellar wallet or application. They can use it to make payments. They can trade for it or other assets on the network. At any point, they can also then redeem that asset for the underlying currency that it represents. And once those currencies are represented on Stellar, they gain all of the technological advantages of the network. They can be stored, transferred, and traded fast, easy, and cheap. Next slide. And this one's important. This is regulators and compliance pieces aren't new to blockchain. Anytime you touch fiat or any kind of currency, there's a regulatory issue that you have to think through. And so it's important that any entity that touches fiat, even on the blockchain, will be regulated. So in the payment space, you have AML, which is anti-money laundering, and then KYC, which is know your customer, regulations that exist. And they exist to protect against illicit transactions like terrorist financing, fraud, money laundering. In short, any bad actor is trying to hide what they really are up to. So if you create an asset on Stellar and you offer your users a custodial wallet as an on and off ramp to move that asset to and from fiat currency in the real world, Stellar has built-in functionality that makes it easy for businesses to perform processes like this KYC AML checks before accepting deposits or honoring withdrawals. These are built in at the protocol level. So again, it's easy to access, easy to use, and there's no complicated coding required. The network also has compliance protocols for sending and receiving institutions to share that KYC or AML information about the senders and recipients of transactions. And another key feature on Stellar that offers heightened compliance and control is what we refer to as auth required or authorization required. Stellar's technology enables anyone who is issued a token to require authorization before anyone can hold or transact that token. So an issuer can choose to have this kind of structure around their asset. So that means that in addition to performing checks at the on and off ramp stage, as I described before, an asset issuer can also set it up so that their token can't be sent without their authorization, meaning they can run required checks, whether those are KYC and AML or any additional checks before anyone holds their token. And that's important to some. So next slide. So Stellar is also open source and supports common development languages like Java with comprehensive documentation. So some say we have the best documentation out there. It's easy and accessible to get started. Developers can quickly build and operate on the network due to inherent functionality and expansive support resources that include on-chain decentralized order books. So there's fast close times. Again, I mentioned 3 to 5 second ledgers, negligible transaction costs, as I mentioned before, and the ease of creating those new assets. But also there's a test network, and there's comprehensive tutorials. There's well-documented and straightforward SDKs in many languages. And there's also this ecosystem that has now built up around Stellar that is super engaged and that wants to help projects gain traction immediately. So all this means is that developers can focus on their product and rely on all of these resources out there in the world. So next slide. And finally, it's sustainable. Not all blockchains achieve consensus in the same way. And certain blockchains consume enormous amounts of energy and resources to make them work. But our consensus protocol is not proof of work or proof of stake. It's Federated Byzantine Agreement, so an FBA. And that means it requires only the energy it takes to run a server. So these features are a lot of the reasons why companies are building on Stellar today. Next slide. So now I want to jump in and talk about an example of a company that's built on Stellar. So DStock is a Liechtenstein-based fintech company that is helping make investing accessible and affordable for people in emerging markets. It has a borderless digital interface for security tokens built on the Stellar network. So what does this actually mean? It means that through this mobile phone and through this interface on the mobile device, users have access to blue chip shares like Tesla or Amazon, as well as bonds and indices and commodities using fiat or cryptocurrencies. This product is starting in markets like Vietnam, South Africa, and will grow into other African markets as well as South American and Asian developing countries. So importantly, this is access to a financial system that in the United States we take for granted that they're now going to have access to through this DStock app. DStock users require only a smartphone to access this financial markets, and which thanks to Stellar's infrastructure and the layer, it makes the entire process not only more accessible, but much more efficient. So they chose Stellar due to some unique properties that benefit their business model. For example, Stellar enables the tokenization of assets, like we talked about before, such as shares of Apple, in a far more efficient manner that allows users in emerging markets to invest in a fraction of what it would otherwise cost them to do. DStock is driving this financial inclusion in markets and markets that desperately need this kind of access to global products. For too long, these markets have been ignored. And we're working with DStock to change that with this exciting technology. Their work kind of speaks directly to the mission of the Stellar Development Foundation. So creating that opportunity for emerging markets to have finance in ways that they've never had access to before, improving the lives of millions of people, while simultaneously creating some pretty exciting businesses and business opportunities, that's our ultimate goal. Next slide. So I started this talk by talking about evolutions that we've seen in how we engaged with money and value throughout history. The world is becoming more digital in almost all respects. It's the fourth industrial revolution. As technology rapidly evolves to enable new and exciting innovations, and in parallel, as consumers' expectations change. That progression towards digitization will naturally and inevitably extend to how the world engages with money. DStock is showing us that this next evolution is already happening today, that embracing digitalization of money can make the financial systems more connected and more interoperable. So recognizing this shift begs the question is, how do we want the world to look? Who do we entrust to create and maintain this important technology that has the power and potential to democratize finance and reduce inequalities? So SDF is a nonprofit company that's focused on using blockchain to create this equitable access to the global financial system. In fact, that's our mission. We are working to use this blockchain technology to advance the evolution of money in ways that drive financial inclusion. Next slide. So who are we? Well, we're a nonprofit, non-stock entity. We're not a charity, and we pay taxes. But the important thing is the capital that we have is only used to make Stellar a success, because we want to put everything back into seeing a more equitable world. That's our sole mission. We use Stellar blockchain to democratize the systems and create greater access to the financial services. So next slide. We see our key function in this ecosystem to be these. So we've created these pillars that we line all of our work up into. The first one is ensure the robustness of our technology. So we're constantly working to improve Stellar, the network, and to react to the needs of the ecosystem. And we do this through creating more documentation, to ensuring scalability, to improving on all of the access that businesses can get to the network. And secondly, we want to be the blockchain that people know and trust. Trust is crucial when you're dealing with money and when you're dealing with value. And so we're focused on ensuring that regulators and users have the opportunity not only to know Stellar and to know SDF, and so we're very transparent. Our website has lots of information about SDF, its assets, and how we move them. And we want them to feel comfortable with the work that we're doing. So we create roadmaps, and we also make sure that everything that we can do, we put in the open. And then finally, we want to foster sustainable use cases on Stellar. So we want to invest in businesses like DStock, or we want to build application layers ourselves like Vibrant, a non-custodial wallet that's focused on Latin America that'll be out soon, to be able to show the power of this technology that's in front of us. Next slide. So as I mentioned a couple times already, we're open source and we take that to heart. And we don't just try to be open in our code, we try to be open in what we do. So you can see on our website that we have a mandate page, and our mandate is available in real time so our ecosystem can see how we use the funds that we've allocated for different things. The mandate structures accounts, and it defines how we leverage those accounts and is updated just every second. Next slide. So together we can set the next payment standard. We hope that you'll join us. You can learn more about Stellar at stellar.org, or join us at our virtual conference in November at Meridian. Next slide. And finally, I just want to say thank you so much, and I'm happy to take any questions if we still have time.
Great, thank you so much, Danelle. That was very clear, and you know, a wonderful mission in terms of driving financial inclusion, and it's great to see that there are real examples. We do have quite a few questions, and I doubt that we'll get through all of them in the time that we have remaining. But let me just start out very quickly and ask you a question. You had mentioned that in terms of driving you know, financial inclusion and the digitization of capital, we really need to be looking at regulation and a lot of different factors. So what do you think is going to drive adoption the quickest?
Oh, it's so interesting because I think that I think regulation that exists today is actually, most of the financial institutions on the edges are already regulated. Regulation can hinder adoption for sure, and it can make it more challenging, but I think regulation is just a thing that we need to engage with and be a part of. I think what could actually hinder adoption of this technology is that it's actually, we haven't focused a lot on user experience and user experience design. And from my standpoint, if we want blockchain to take off, so not just at the SDF and with Stellar, if we want it to take off from the standpoint of all the folks out there that are working on it, we need to be hyper-focused on user and the user experience and to make it really simple. If we make it really simple, users are going to want to engage. That's the key thing with product development, right? So I think that is the thing that will make this explode. Make it simple, make it just as easy as using email for almost everything, and then users are going to adopt it quickly, I think.
Wonderful. Now, in terms of hackability of the network, you mentioned that it is resistant to 51% attacks. Have there been any successful attacks against the Stellar network, and do you see that there's the potential for the network to be hacked?
So no, we haven't. I mean, that the whole point of the way that it's structured with the SCP, the Stellar Consensus Protocol, and with other protections we have in the protocol layer for security, we haven't seen any of that. And the network's been around for over 5 years. So, you know, if I had wood around me, I would knock, but I just don't see that as being a problem just because of the way that it was structured.
Wonderful. So you also had mentioned that in terms of the regulation not needing to change in order to gain adoption, do you think that if there were a digital dollar, or if there were CBDCs, so central bank digital currencies, do you think that that would have a negative or a positive impact on Stellar?
Well, I think that CBDCs will have a positive impact, and forget Stellar. I think they'll just have a positive impact in this space generally. I think it's complicated for CBDCs because central banks aren't used to engaging with the users individually, so there'll have to be another mechanism set up from that standpoint. But on Stellar, again, like Stellar is the perfect network to be able to issue these kinds of digital assets on. And for CBDCs, if they were issued and available on Stellar, it just creates huge opportunity for, I think, frankly, for the world.
Sure. And in terms of the, taking things to the next level in terms of financial inclusion, do you think that the developing world would be the best place to start, or do you see that the developed world could lead the way? Where do you see it, or do you see it running in parallel?
So we're definitely focused more from the applications that we build, and also just the technology stack and the folks that we partner with. When I say partner, meaning that they come to us for support to build on the network from the developing world. The need is so great in terms of just bringing things that we just take for granted in the United States, for example. We take just our access to a bank being right down the street. We take that for granted. We don't think about the fact that in some countries, they either don't have access to bank accounts, or the bank's hundreds of miles away for them. So I think the developing world, from our standpoint, that's our key focus. We think that we already are seeing such great momentum from entities that we call anchors on our network, which are essentially financial institutions that issue these assets, and how they can actually just make the work that they do so much easier when they have the digital token that they can utilize with their consumers, but also their banking, their business partnerships as well. So developing world is, I think, definitely where the largest impact will happen, but definitely it could help in the developed world as well. But our focus is definitely on the developing world.
Can you, if we take a look at those anchors that you talked about in the developing world, can you tell us a little bit more about those and how what types of things they're doing?
So a lot of them are remittance companies already. And so, for example, we have Cowrie in Nigeria. They've issued an asset called NGNT, and it's a digital representation of the Nigerian currency. And so from there, they have business clients that they can actually help to get money from Nigeria into Europe or into the United States, because they can use the digital asset on the other side. Those clients might not have any reason to know that blockchain is being utilized for the transfer of that value, because all they care about is that money's been taken out of their account in Nigeria and it's been transferred to an account either in the US or you pick the location. That's what they care about. And then it's deposited into that account. And then the technology in between has been the blockchain technology that they use. So it's pretty cool. We see this, the more anchors that we bring on, they have different business models. Some of them are on and off ramps, meaning that it's the way to get into the blockchain and to get out of the blockchain. So they can be that, or they can just also issue just the asset and then use another entity for on and off ramps. So it's really exciting to see. It's one of the things that we're focused on, is just bringing more anchors to the network so that there's more opportunity to open up these corridors all over the world for the businesses and for the individuals.
Sure. Now, that's great. So we have, you have the infrastructure and the code base in order to build this greater financial inclusion. You have these anchors. So to the developers in the audience, if we take a look at, you had mentioned that, Stellar has very extensive documentation. What's the best place for them to go? Is there an online community, or, should they just go to your website and are there forums or GitHubs? How does it work?
So the documentation, most of it is in GitHub. You can access all of it through stellar.org, and you can go to the developer section of the website. And there's communities that you can engage with, community forums that you can engage with there. And I just really encourage everyone to do it. It's a super cool technology, not just Stellar. I think Stellar is awesome. I know it the best, but just blockchain generally, and the opportunity for what blockchain can do to really change the world. And I don't say that in meaning, this esoteric way. It really can, like, fundamentally just make things so much easier and open up access to just people everywhere.
Yeah, so if we take a look at remittances, the fees for remittances can be 7, 10, 15, 20%, which is a huge amount of, the money that people are working very hard in order to obtain. You mentioned that for $1 you could do hundreds or thousands of transactions on Stellar. What's the typical kind of transaction fee that you're seeing in remittance networks that are based on Stellar?
So importantly, it was a penny that you could do.
Oh, it's a penny.
The transaction fees on the network are just, it's a way to stop DDoS attacks and to stop spam the network. So the transaction fees for the network layer are just super tiny. So we're definitely seeing improved percentages for fees. I think it's important that the more volume that is on the blockchain, the lower the fees will become, because that's just, you know, how business works.
Yeah,
but they're improved in terms of the the fees that are available currently. But more importantly, it just happens so much faster. So you don't have to wait 3 or 4 days. I get so frustrated now after coming into this business. And then I think about like how my bank, if I just go from one bank account to another bank account, just my checking to my savings, and how long it takes that transfer to actually happen. It's kind of crazy because the money's there and it should just be like that. And so when you actually do see the finality of blockchain and how quickly that can happen, I think that is the more compelling focus. Transaction fees and businesses, people have to create competition and bring those fees down even more than the existing fees. And I think that can happen with volume, but it's the speed and the simplicity at which it happens, which is more compelling to me, to be honest.
Well, thank you so much, Danelle, and thank you for your passion and the excitement around Stellar and all the work that you're doing, to further financial inclusion and democratize, access to these financial services on a global basis.
Yep. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
Bye, everyone.
So